If anyone wishes to join, then they can join between the lecture as well. So because we have changed our time schedule and some students are not able to adjust in this way, so they always demand the recording classes. So before start, as usual, I would like to take your confirmation if my voice and my video is completely visible to you. Am I audible to you? Can you hear me completely? Navneet, can you hear me? Navneet, okay, all right. I have just got the confirmation from you all. Yesterday we studied about the hypothesis testing, and that was very important topic. I taught you from the very deep and basic knowledge about hypothesis. Okay, I told you about null hypothesis. I told you about the different things. Okay, like types of hypothesis, the process of a hypothesis, what is hypothesis, okay, level of significance, number of things we have gone through. And I believe that if you have understood my yesterday's lecture and if you have watched it repeatedly, then all your concepts regarding the hypothesis testing shall be clear. And now understanding about the different tests like T test, then F test, Z test, chi-scale test, these will be very easy for you to understand right now. So now I'm just going to explain about today's topic. Let me just open all the systems and then I show you what we have prepared for you in today's lecture. And this is again going to be very interesting, just believe me. All right, I have just opened that and now I'm going to share the screen so that everything is visible to you. And again, two things I have to share with you. First of all, in between the lecture, if anyone wishes to join, they can. That's the other thing. Just to control your cell phone's microphone and the video camera as well. And if in case due to any kind of weather connectivity, if you are facing any kind of issues, okay, you can just leave the meeting. You do not need to be bothered about that. Each and everything shall be recorded as usual and it shall be sent to you because you are my regular student, and we send each and every recording to all the students whether they have joined the class or not joined the class on a specific day. So this is why you don't have to bother about that. No, now I am just going to share the screen so that this is visible to you. Before sharing, again, I want to ask you one question, okay? So that I just need some kind of a confirmation from you whether you have understood about basics of a hypothesis or not. Only then the tests can be started. Do you have understood about the basics of a hypothesis like types, like null and alternate hypothesis, normal distribution? Do you have understood? Do you have gone through from the lectures, from the recorded versions? I just need the reply in yes. All right. All right. Navneet, do you have understood about the basics of hypothesis? All right. I've got the confirmation. Thank you so much for that confirmation. And I hope everyone shall be regular with whatever the stuff we are providing to you. Now I am going to share my screen and I am going to teach you. And in case need be there, we shall be taking the second lecture as well for today. But this lecture is going to be very important and very interesting as well, because now you people are moving towards the higher path of understanding the research philosophy. Now you are actually ushering towards how the research is done and you are learning about doing research. We have already gone through from the hypothesis basics. Okay, we have understood its basics. We have understood its core meaning. Okay, after that, we have understood how hypothesis is made. We have understood about the different types of hypothesis. We have understood about null and alternate hypothesis. Again, just for making clear your mind, just for recalling all the things we did yesterday, we learned that in a null hypothesis, we assume that there is no difference between the population parameters and sample statistics. That was our crux. And we assume that. And this basically means that whatever the assumption or hypothesis I have made, this is true and this is right, and yes, it shall happen. If I've said that tomorrow shall be rain, then it shall happen. Okay, so this was about null hypothesis and alternate. We do not set it, automatically sets itself as a complementary to null hypothesis. So now in today's lecture, we have to understand about hypothesis procedure. You know that before starting this lecture, I told you, I asked you a question that if you have understood about hypothesis basics, okay, why I asked you, the only reason is that today we have to understand about the hypothesis procedure, and after that uh, we have to study what the meaning of a t-test is and why this is applied. Okay, and you shall be able to understand this lecture only if you have gone through from the basics of a hypothesis. That was the reason why I asked you this question before starting of this lecture. Now we move further, and I shall tell you how the hypothesis procedure is done. Okay, so basically what we have to do, we have to go through from some points. Okay, some points, these are necessary, and the procedure of a hypothesis is very important because my experience is one or two times the question from the hypothesis procedure was asked in the examination. So now I move further. This is the procedure of a hypothesis. Each and everything you already know if you have understood yesterday's lecture. Okay. First step is this is also the procedure of research, doing research in which the hypothesis testing is going to be used. Okay. So step one is, first of all, we have to state the null hypothesis. First of all, we have to write our statement. The first step of hypothesis is testing is setting of two hypotheses. The first hypothesis is null hypothesis and the second one is alternate hypothesis. If I am saying that my trading strategy shall be effective and generate profits. Suppose I am a researcher of a derivative market, so we usually make trading strategies as well for going for the derivative and financial markets. So suppose I have made a new strategy, okay, and I am making an assumption. The assumption is that my trading strategy shall be effective and it shall generate profit certainly. Okay, if I'm saying this is a null hypothesis. Okay, then the alternate hypothesis is automatically made. This is that the trading strategy shall not generate profits. Okay, it shall not generate profits and it shall not be this much effective like I'm saying. Okay, so this is alternate hypothesis. This is hypothesis null, this is hypothesis alternative. The first step is you have to set the hypothesis. Two types of hypothesis: first null, second alternate. So this is the first process of doing the research. The next one is you have to determine the level of significance. Yesterday we did that. Okay, I told you that you can never be certain about something of 100%. You can say only up to the level of we can say 95% or 90% or 99% or 80% or anything, but we can never be certain about something to the level of 100%. So the first step was a setting up of two complementary hypotheses. The second was setting up of a level of significance. You have to choose your level of significance. Okay. The third is you have to determine the appropriate test. There are number of statistical tests. Okay. First starts with the t-test. After t-test, here comes the turn of z-test. After that, there is chi-square test. Then there is F test. Then there is ANOVA. So these are some statistical tests, okay? And you have to determine the appropriate test as per the requirement of your data. Okay, this is step third. The first, I'm again recalling you each and everything. Okay, the first thing you have to set your hypothesis. Secondly, you have to determine the level of significance. Third, you have to choose your appropriate test. Then you have to draw the appropriate conclusion. Okay, how this is done? When you apply the t-test or any kind of test, it has a critical value in the table. Critical value in the table given on the appendix of your book. Okay, so each and every test, when you conduct this test, you get a specific value. This is an observed value, and you just compare this value with the actual value of the table of that specific test. Each and every test has its specific table. T test has its separate table. F test has its separate table. Then chi-square has separate table. Same. Z test has separate table. Okay. First, what you do, you find the observed value. How do you find? You apply the test, you apply the formula. This is a practical thing. Okay, you apply the formula to the data points of your variable, and after applying the formula, you find the observed value. And after finding the observed value, just compare this observed value with the actual table value of that specific test. And if this matches, or if this falls in the area of acceptance, then you draw the conclusion. Okay, then you take the decision whether to accept the null hypothesis or reject the null hypothesis. So this is all of the procedure. I think you would have understood this completely. Only 4 steps are there: setting up of 2 hypotheses, after that setting up of or choosing the level of significance, then there is determination of appropriate tests for your study, then you have to draw your conclusion, and conclusion is drawn by going through this procedure. I have taught you to the best of my knowledge and belief. Now, actually, we are going to study about the different tests, and these are very easy. And I must tell you, some of you would be very fond of solving the practicals, but I never suggest that. But the thing is, you have to remind the formulas of all the tests. Okay, and these have already been given in the notes as well, because solving of practicals shall not bear any kind of a fruit for you if you are preparing for NET or JRF examination. They are not going to ask you to solve the standard error of t-test, okay, for certain statistics like mean or standard deviation. They are not going to ask you that kind of question. Yes, but they can ask you what is the formula of a standard error of a mean in case of a small sample size. Okay, these kind of questions can be asked in the examination. So this is test of a hypothesis in sampling variables, sampling of variables of small size. Okay, I have already taught you about the population. I have told you that population contains a number of elements. Okay, and if we are choosing the elements only to the limit of 30 or below 30, that means if I am choosing my respondents, I have suppose I have 100 elements in my population, but my sample size is below 30 or below 30, then this kind of a study is known as a small size sample study. Okay, the only relevant test which is applied on small size variables is known as t-test. Okay, and any kind of sample which is having the elements of more than 30 is known as large sample. This is known as large sample. So you would have understood the difference between small and large size samples. Small size sample are simply those in which the sample size is lesser than or equal to 30, and large are the sample size are greater than 30. So by term sampling of variable of small size, we mean selecting sample of 30 or less unit from population which can assume any value within the wider range of variables. So that you have to understand. So the next is there are characteristics of small size samples. The first is its size is always limited to 30 at the maximum. So this is the first characteristics. Then it may not take the shape of normal distribution. Small size samples may not take the shape of normal distribution. This is the normal distribution. I hope you would have understood this completely, and you are my regular students, and I believe that you go through from all the videos for twice or thrice, because you have to understand the concepts, all the concepts, because my purpose is that. So it's not always possible that the small size sample take the shape of the normal distribution. It can take any shape. It can take the shape like that as well. Okay, it can take any shape. Okay, may not. The word has been used may not. It's not that exactly not. Okay, it's not written that it cannot take the shape of normal. Yes, it can take, but most of the time it does not take the shape of normal distribution. We are talking about small sample only. Then it's also possible that we cannot substitute any statistics for any parameter. Now you must understand the two words. Okay, parameter I have already told you. Statistic I have already told you. Okay, how if we find any kind of measures of central tendency for a population, this is your parameter. Okay, and if we find any kind of central tendency for our sample, then this is your statistic value. Okay, statistic value. And this characteristics is saying that you cannot substitute any statistics with any parameter. I mean to say, you cannot say that the mean of the sample is equal to mean of the population, or the standard deviation of the sample is equal to standard deviation of the population. You cannot say that. You cannot substitute any statistic like mean, standard deviation of such sample for parameter of the population. So this was the third characteristics. You will understand this only if you have understood the yesterday's lecture. Then its mean can vary greatly. It can vary greatly. It can be any value. Okay, like if the population mean comes to be, for example, 55, then the samples mean can vary greatly. It can be like 110 or 5 only, or anything like that. Okay, it can vary from the population mean greatly. So this is also the characteristics of small size samples. Then its standard deviation is always smaller than universe. Okay, how? This is a population standard deviation. This is a sample standard deviation, which is also known as standard error, which I taught you yesterday. Okay, so this is always lesser than this. Okay, so samples standard deviation is always lesser than population's standard deviation. This is the fifth characteristics of a small size sample. Then the sixth one is appropriate test is only the t-test for these kind of samples. Okay, for we cannot use test statistics of large sample in case of samples with lesser than 30 units only. We can only use t-test. Okay, t-test statistic is used for finding the observed value from the samples having the size lesser than 30. Then now we have to go through from t distribution. 6 characteristics were there till now. What I have taught you, we are just going to recall everything. We learned about the procedure of a hypothesis. This is setting up of two hypotheses, then determining the level of significance, then determine appropriate test, then appropriate conclusion must be drawn. And after that, we studied about the small size variables, small size samples, and we learned about their characteristics. Okay, these were the characteristics, and you don't need to bother. You have to understand that, and everything shall be delivered to you via WhatsApp. The next is T distribution. T distribution is also known as a T test. Okay, who propounded that in the year 1900 by Sir William S. Gosset. Okay, he lived at that era. He was an employee of Guinness and Son and a Dublin and Brewery Company of Ireland to deal with the problems of on small samples. For dealing on the problem with small samples, he propounded this distribution. This is known as t-test. Then his theory was published in 1905, okay, by Mr. Gossett under the pseudonym or pen name Student. Okay, he had a pen name Student as his employer did not allow him to publish any such research work in his own name. Okay, at that time he used the word T only to refer students of him. Okay, so this was the history of a t-test, somewhat history only necessary. They are not going to ask it in a very detailed manner. So this distribution is popularly known as after his pen name Students t-test or simply T distribution. Then according to Gossett's theory, T distribution takes form of a bell-shaped frequency like that of normal distribution shown as under. So this is how the T distribution takes place. I told you that small samples may not take the shape of the normal distribution, but T distribution takes the shape of the normal distribution, but this is not exactly like normal distribution. Okay, so normal distribution is like that. Okay, so normal distribution is like that, but a T distribution has wider tails. This has wider tails and its height is smaller than the normal distribution. So this is about T distribution. So this is a normal distribution and this is T distribution for 12 degree of freedom. This is again T distribution for 3 degrees of freedom. I shall tell you about degrees of freedom as well. You don't need to be bothered by now. Okay. So this is how it shapes. Okay. So we have to understand about its features now. Okay, it gives a normal bell-shaped curve, which is symmetrical. Okay, first feature is this. Then the shape of its curve is determined by only one parameter. This is degree of freedom. Okay, so this is how it is done. So this is degree of freedom at 12. This is degree of freedom at 3. If we have to find the t-test on 15 degree of freedom, it shall be wider than 12 degree of freedom. Now, what's the meaning of this term? And once or two times this term has been asked in the examination as well. What is the degree of freedom? Degree of freedom means the number of variables, or you can simply say data points. Number of data points you can vary freely. I know that by just telling this line, you will not be able to understand that. Okay, let me give you a very simple example. Just take 5 digits. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Take their average. Okay, for finding the average, you have to sum all these. That comes to be 15, and you have to divide by the total numbers. This is 5. Okay, when you divide, this is 3. Okay, suppose you already know this. You already know 3, but you don't know the last digit. Okay, you don't know the last digit, but you know that average is 3. Then you can easily find this. Okay, you can easily find this. That means you are having the 4 data points which are free to use, which are freely available to use. You can vary these data points to any value and you can find the last value freely. This is known as the concept of a degree of freedom. And how this is found? This is very simple. If number of data points in your variable are 20, then the degree of freedom shall be 20 minus 1, that is 19. This is your degree of freedom. You can vary the 19 data points in order to find the 20th data point. So this is called the concept of degree of freedom. And in case of a t-test, higher the degree of freedom, higher shall be the height of the curve. So this was about the concept of degree of freedom. I think that was very easy, and it's saying that T distribution is affected only by the degree of freedom. I think that I have missed that slide because I wish to teach the concept of degree of freedom on this slide, but I was in flow, so I have already taught you in the previous slide like that. So the next is it is higher than the normal distribution at both tails. At both tails, it is higher. You can see here. These are the tails of normal distribution, but these are the tails of a T distribution. So it is said that it is higher than normal distribution at both the tails. Then it has a larger areas at tails than normal distribution. So it is having the larger areas. Okay, how these are larger areas? You can see the difference. This is the area of T, and but this is the area of normal distribution. This is the area of T distribution. This is the area of normal distribution. So you can say that this has the larger area in the tails, in both the tails, than a normal distribution. You can easily say that. Then its mean is always zero. Its mean is always zero. For a T distribution, mean is always zero. We are talking about sample statistics only. Okay. Then its variance is always greater than unity. It's always greater than 1. And once the sample size increases, its variance approaches to unity. Like from 20, 22, then 24, then it comes to 30, then its variance automatically approaches to unity. Unity means 1. Then the next is it has a set of critical values. This is very simple to understand. This feature is saying that t-test has its own table, which is having the critical values assigned under all the degrees of freedom. Now what you have to do, I think in the notes the t-test table has already been given, but if you have the book of your undergraduation or post-graduation, after completing this lecture, you have to open that book and you have to see the table of T statistic that has been given as the appendix of your book. And in this table, it will be written that for a particular degree of freedom, like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there is a certain amount on the next row or column. Okay, it is given. So this is said that it has a set of critical values. This is known as critical value, critical value, critical value, critical value. So this is critical value for a degree of freedom 1. This is critical value of degree of freedom 2. This is critical value for a degree of freedom 3. Okay. So in this way, you have to you can say that the t-test has a set of critical values, and these values are compared with the observed value. Observed values I have already taught you. You have to apply the formula to your data points. After applying the formula, you shall get a value which is known as observed value, and you have to compare this observed value with the critical value of the table. Only then you can accept or reject your null hypothesis. Then I think this is the last one. Its value ranges from minus or negative infinity to positive infinity. Simply like that. Its values are negative infinity. It stretches more and more, but it never touches to the axis. So this is why it is said that its value always ranges from negative infinity to positive infinity. So its techniques can be used for testing of a hypothesis for not only small tests. They are just saying t-test can be used for both kind of samples, small as well as large as well, but in some cases only. But for small, always t-test is used. Okay. Then we have some assumption. I think these are 3 assumptions. After that, the topic of t distribution shall be over. These assumptions are: it is assumed that the parent population is normal. It is always believed that the population from which the sample has been taken, this is the complete population, and we have taken the sample of only 30 data points. The first assumption is this parent population is normally distributed. this is having the normal distribution. It is the first assumption of a t-test. Then the second assumption is we are taking the sample at random. This is saying that for sampling, we are using the sampling technique, probability sampling technique. This is random sampling only. Third, it's saying that it is always assumed that the population standard deviation is not known. And this is very obvious thing. We always assume that we can never know the standard deviation of the population. So this was the last assumption, and in this way the topic of t-test completes, and we shall be delivering you all the notes and the video regarding that. And I believe you would have understood if we are just recalling all the things of today's lecture. We did about the procedure of hypothesis testing, where we learned how to set the two hypotheses. Then after that you have to set level of significance. Then simply there is the concept of determining the appropriate test, then determining the appropriate conclusion. How this is done, I have taught you in this. You have to listen this video for 2 or 3 times to have better clarity. Then we understood about what is small samples. Small sample is the sample having the size of sample lesser than 30. Then its characteristics we studied. Then most importantly, today we learned about t-distribution. This is the very first test in the hypothesis testing. And we learned about its tails and its relationship with the normal distribution. And finally, we learned about its assumptions. Okay. So this was about normal distribution. Now you have to understand it in a very core manner. Okay. So now what we have to do, today is Friday, so you people are having the 2 days with you, and from Monday onwards we are trying our best to take your individual subject test. Okay, this is the new initiative the Gurpal Education is going to take. We are planning to conduct the individual tests for different subjects. Okay, like for the different subject in your paper second as well. If there are 10 subjects, then we shall be taking the test at randomly for any subject. Okay, and this will be for everyone, and these shall be uploaded in the YouTube channel. And you shall be able to make your questions right only if you have gone through from all the video lectures, all the things, all the stuffs we are providing to you. So I genuinely believe that you are regular, and in case anybody is having any kind of problem, they can simply tell us. So on Monday we shall be having 1 or 2 lectures. We have to complete the Z test, and after that chi-square and F test, and after that our hypothesis shall be completely over, and we shall be finishing our research for the paper 2 and paper 1 as well. And we are already leading advance. Okay, I have already given these many lectures that your research should get over by now. So you have to be regular with all the notes, and we can call you, we can take the note of your preparation anytime, and you have to be regular with all the stuffs we are providing to you. This is Gurpal Singh from Gurpal Education. Thank you so much for joining me.